Before we start this discussion with Phil Circle, take a minute and go online and look up The World According to Allie Willis. Brand new documentary about her very unique life and how she contributed to society in myriad ways. It's 2024, so check it out. And now it's time to talk with Phil Circle. Hi, everybody. We are back with Creativity is the Cure. Today, my special guest is my new friend, Phil Circle. How you doing, Phil?
Great, Malcolm. Thanks for having me on here.
Phil and I actually met really recently because we had the honor of going to Allie Willis's Wonderland.
Yeah, it was a pre-screening of the World According to Allie Willis, the documentary that they have coming out, and a tour around her living museum of kitsch.
Yeah,
and meeting with about 20 of us educators / pro musicians scattered about LA County and beyond. And
it was a wonderful random opportunity. I think we were both pretty honored to be part of it. And then we got to do some fun training at USC, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was definitely a great time. And I'm right there with you. I was honored as well. I was kind of shocked when I got the email.
Yeah, and then right away, I think you and I met and got along immediately.
Yeah, we met at the house, and then we met when we were lost on the campus at USC.
I forgot about that. I had never been to USC, and it was like a labyrinth. I was like, good God. I can't remember how many times I had to ask for help. But anyway, for people that don't know, I know you as a musician, educator, and composer, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, you got all those things right. I've been a music writer for many years. I come from Chicago originally, and I wrote for a number of publications, first in print, and then, of course, they moved to online. I wrote a book about my experience as an independent musician, which I've been since I, somehow managed to convince people I was good enough to get on stage back in about 92.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the book, too. So you have two schools. You have one in Chicago and one here in L.A., is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. Yeah, the one in Chicago is the more active school with regard to there are 10 professional musicians there teaching adults. Here in L.A., it's just me.
Yeah.
So I take on private coaching and do occasional workshops here. Yeah, but it's adult music education.
That is really cool. All right. So what we do on this podcast, you're obviously a very traditionally creative guy. And what we try to do is we talk about, they say the right side of the brain is the creative part, but studies are showing that you need both parts, left and right, to really execute and pull off these ideas. However, I was thinking a couple of years ago, I had some challenges and I solved them. And after I did, I said, wait a second, this is like when I do a drum solo and I'm thinking of things, stream of consciousness, and I'm making it up as I go along. And I thought, that's how I solved the problem I just had. So I started thinking, we're all creative, even if you don't think we are. And if we investigate, we find out that same part of our brain is really helping us get through the ups and downs of life. Would you agree?
100%. Yes. We come from the same wheelhouse of thought. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go way back in time. What is your first memory of being creative? I know you're a great singer, guitar player, but even before that, how did you realize that you had a really cool creative part of your brain and that you could maybe make something up on the spot?
Well, I ruin a little bit of the answer by my actual first memory is of singing over the phone to my grandfather, who was a recording artist in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Wow.
And an accountant by trade.
That's really cool.
And he made all his money in accounting, but he recorded albums. He put my mom on a few. And so that, that's all like piles and piles of too much history to dig into. But that is my first memory. But I have another one with my other grandpa.
Okay.
And it was in front of the Illinois legislature on a really hot day.
Yeah.
And he was trying to pass a bill and thought his 4-year-old grandson would be cute and win over, whomever he was trying to win over. And he didn't win, so I didn't go into politics. But I remember the experience of interacting with people and feeling like when you're that young, and the ability to interact with adults means that you're playing make-believe all the time. You're creatively, manufacturing what you think adults like and what you think adults act like and that kind of stuff. So it really, what you said, that we're all creative, is there's absolutely no question in my mind.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're talking a little bit about of the whole in and out or call and response thing, that you did something and you got a response, and then you're onto something going, I kind of like this. If I do this, they respond this way. I can make people respond emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as kids we pick up on that, and then when we're taught how we should function around the mores of society and culture wherever we are, we tend to kind of squash those things. And that's why they know, like right now they're talking in studies about the value of adults playing make believe like a child.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous. I'm like an educated man. I'm 58. I should know how to behave. All this kind of BS. Yeah. And really, the bottom line is the goofiness that I present to my wife to make her laugh. Yeah. Is me playing. It's me digging into the ridiculous, creative, goofy kid. And that youthfulness, it's good for us at so many levels. But as a creative person, you're not going to stagnate if you keep digging into that. You can't. I
absolutely agree. And I don't know if you saw it I think it was on either YouTube Shorts or TikTok recently. Willem Dafoe was challenging everybody. I challenge you, go make a mistake, mess up on purpose, and you'll be blown away what you learn.
Oh, I think I've heard of this, but I haven't seen it. Now I have to go look at it.
Now, you've told a little bit about your grandparents, but some people believe that creativity can be passed down genetically. And of course, it can be activated by the environment. So when you think about your parents, what types of creativity do you think that you got from each of them?
First of all, I've taught thousands of people throughout my 30 years of teaching, and more of them who came from quote-unquote non-musical families turned into great musicians than ones who, like me, came from creative families. Right. And I'm the youngest of six. I'm the only one that was crazy enough to try and make a career in the arts, even though my mom and my grandma and my grandpa were musicians. What I got creatively from my mom, the musician, who was also a borderline personality, narcissistic, personality, dysfunctional individual.
A little bit of everything.
But an extraordinary human being. Yeah. So the creativity I really got from her was partly how to function around her. I can recall when I was 7 years old, watching her kind of lose it in the house one day because we were doing a home movie or something, and like a light started smoking, and I said, should that be doing that? I was standing there perfectly calm, and she just kind of made drama, and I was like, I think my mom's a little off. Yeah. And so I learned creativity as a human being around dealing with this dysfunction and high functioning family that I was in.
That's a great example.
My dad was an entrepreneur, and he actually had more to do with encouraging me to go into music than my mom did. Because for all six of us, the great gift he gave us all was do what you're good at and what you love to do. Yeah, because that's what he did, and so I looking back on it, I see these things. What are we ultimately doing? As children, we're learning to function with to deal with the human condition. What do we choose to do, and more intentionally, as creative artists, is reflect on that human condition. So these experiences inform our lives. So it isn't somebody handed you a charcoal and a piece of paper and said draw, and that was the beginning of your creativity. It's the things that don't look like art that make us creative people.
I absolutely agree. And you're also making me think that, there's a lot of stigma out there. Some people may describe one person as bipolar or borderline personality, and that may be their diagnosis, but there's a lot of people that make beautiful art that happen to have that diagnosis. I mean, for example, I read in an article that Stevie Wonder is bipolar. That doesn't surprise me, because if you know his music, he has tremendously sad music and then ebullient happy music, and he can take you to a high and a low. And the other one is my students got me into this new female singer named Charlie XCX, and she's self-described as borderline personality, and she uses her music to let these feelings out and try to figure out how to fit in the world.
Well, and I saw a cartoon one day, like not an animation, but just like a cartoon, and it was a picture of like this huge auditorium full of seats, and a big banner said, "Welcome to the convention for children of normal parents," and there were like two people in the seats. and 1,000 empty chairs, So we all deal with that. And I was diagnosed bipolar. I went to Betty Ford for addiction and alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
I function much better than I did because I learned the tools. And do these things, though, push us to need to explain what's happening in our hearts, in our minds? Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that every artist should be crazy, or that you should either romanticize or stigmatize these things in order to, be an artist or to celebrate the arts. Well, of course, he's crazy. He's an artist.
Right.
That's just as bad as saying, well, what do you want me to do? I'm an artist. These are both, they're flip sides of the same victimization coin.
Right.
That I think is just not empowering at all. I'm much more empowered by the story of, autistic friend who's a bass player who kills it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more empowered by Billie Eilish, who has Tourette's.
Yeah. Absolutely. And is not afraid to talk about it.
No, and that's the way it ought to be. Because my mom, as I said, I always preface my stories about her with, she was brilliant. There was just no two ways about it. She played Dvorak at 4 years old on one of my grandpa's albums.
Yeah.
She was brilliant.
Yeah.
She had these problems and still managed to hold the family together. And with all the things that my siblings and I would perceive as damage, we all turned out just fine. And I have 19 nieces and nephews who are all fantastic. So obviously we didn't all turn out so bad, Yeah. So, and it's that creative element maybe that we were raised around, this freedom of creativity. Maybe that's what got us through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Then a whole ton of therapy, but,
Everybody wins.
Right. Everybody.
Yeah. I always say everybody's got a monkey on their back, Everybody's got something to deal with. Making me think of everybody's got something to hide but me and my monkey.
Yes. Great tune. I love it.
One of my favorites. So we kind of touched upon this, but do you think that people can use creativity to solve mental issues in their life, like depression and anxiety? Maybe we'll take it from your point of view. How has the creativity helped you through the hard times?
Well, that's a broad question that I want to put out front. So when somebody listens to this, they don't think I should pick up a guitar and that will cure me. Right. There are professionals and they're there for a reason. And my oldest brother was a great musician, and he was professional early in his life, but he went and got a degree in psychology. I think he did that because of how we grew up. Yeah. And you go and you get use the tools available to you, but then to answer how did I use it? Yeah. Well, that was exactly why I was initially a writer, and I would just write at great length. And I tried visual art. I wasn't that good at it, but I also learned piano, and then finally got my mom to break down and let me play a guitar. And the first stuff I wrote was just dark, man. It was like Pink Floyd on Suicide Watch, and it was but. It helped me so much. I was like, this is, I need to go here. But I was so scared to share it with people. And when I did, though, what did I get? That divine selfishness popped up, right? Where they were like, wow, this is amazing. And I went, it is? I'll do more. And so it became a path for me to explore things. And my music is, not entirely autobiographical, but you can dig in there and pretty much know what's happened to Phil. Right. And it helped a ton. It helped me work through things. It still does. I think I did a whole, EP that more or less about like the human revolution of hitting a half a century of age. What does this world mean to me right now? And it was just me sort of reflecting with a baritone guitar, and people were like, this is great. I'm like, oh, good. I hope you find your story in it, because mine's a little convoluted, And I think that's what we do too, is we find the music we latch onto is stories that other people are telling, but we're hearing our own story in them. And I think when we realize that we're doing this great service by providing people with ways to express their own stories, along with dealing with our own issues, then we tap into like one of the key elements of becoming a happy and stable enough person to get through this world. And that is providing a service to other people at the same time that we look after ourselves.
I don't want to jump the gun on the next question, but you're making me remember you and I were hanging out recently in your studio, and you told me you gave your book to a well-known musician because you guys had something in common. Who was that? Or was it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I gave my book to DMC, from
Right.
DMC.
Right.
Yeah, and it was at a conference. It was, I think it was the CD Baby DIY conference in Austin, Texas, and I remember Run DMC and the famous, video with them and Aerosmith and the song along with it, and where they rapped, Walk This Way, and just all this groundbreaking stuff. But I didn't know a whole lot about him, and when he spoke, I was just like, this guy's endearing as can be.
Yeah.
And his stories were a lot about all the suffering he went through by letting other people run his life,
Right.
in essence, and his struggles with alcohol and depression. And he told the audience, he said, look, y'all, everything that you're feeling right now, all your insecurities, all your fears about nobody likes me, or what am I going to do here, and maybe I'm not good enough, and I'm an imposter, and all these things. It's the same stuff that everybody deals with. It's the same stuff that I'm always dealing with. I deal with it right now as I'm standing here. I'm wondering if what I just said is just a bunch of BS. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And his book was 10 Ways Not to Commit Suicide.
Wow.
And it sounds dark, but it is a little bit, but it's also very funny. And his experience with especially the way he tells the story live, is hysterical. So when he started the Q&A, I was like, well, I don't really have anything to ask, and I got to go talk to this other speaker because I got to set up an appointment for coaching with her. And so I went out to her table, and I was sitting there talking to her, and then she, lost track of time, and then she's like, well, I got to get up. This is DMC's table. And I turned, and there's a line of people behind me all the way down the hall, and I'm like, oh, I'm at the front of the line to meet DMC.
Wow.
So he comes around, opens his backpack, and dumps his books onto the table, and I go, Daryl, and he goes, what's up? And I had my book in my hand, I open it up to to a key chapter that I knew he would understand the title of, and he went, ooh, I gotta check this out. And I said, there it is, take it, man. So that we have a picture of him holding my book and me holding his book.
That's right.
And he's about the same age range, I think.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's get on to your book. You were kind enough to give me a copy that I just finished. I loved your book. It's got a rather long title, so I'm going to read it here for everybody. The Outback Musician's Survival Guide. One guy's story of surviving as an independent musician. I think a lot of us relate even to the title. So what prompted you to write this book?
Well, the title actually came from, I was going to write a how-to book in the 90s when I realized independent musicians were going to be a thing. And then in a rare act of humility for like the guy I was in the 90s, I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll wait. But I remembered the title of it when I came around to write when I started to write the book. Now, what it was is initially was a compilation of various stories that I'd written and even some articles and things that I just had, bound and just sold at gigs. I'd print it out on my printer and like spiral bind it and like more merch.
Right.
But when I hit 50, then I was, and that's also like when I was 49, I got sober, and I was turning the corner at 50. And then a friend of mine with a big podcast on music in Chicago and a record label there, he said, Phil, you got to tell some of the dark stories too. And I said, I want to put this all together in a book. So I went through and I printed out all the stories that I thought that were in the existing sort of fake book. And I took out a few and I added a few and I laid them out on the floor and arranged some thread, through it.
Right.
And wrote some new stuff, did some rewriting and that kind of thing. So really, in essence, took 30 years to write.
Yeah.
What I didn't know is that you can write in a nonlinear fashion. You don't have to start with, one day Bob walked out the door and then, go all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
So I was a little bummed when I realized that you could write now in a nonlinear fashion. I was like, I could have done this a long time ago, but I needed that the big turn the corner in my life, so it became, then really just my memoirs so far, the way it sorted itself out as I went through and started to fill in the gaps and connect the stories and things. And I was scared to death when I handed it to a friend of mine at Chicago Tribune and said, can you read this through for me and give it one last, look and everything. And after, I spent a nerve-wracking 2 hours with all my notes on, spelling and grammar and stuff. Then he said, you should, get ready to write another book because people are going to like this. I was like, I had no intention of writing another book, but now I've got one compiling in my brain anyway. So that's kind of how it came to pass. It was really with a lot of encouragement from other people, or you might say just from the way my life moved me into that position. I thought, it's time. And the responses I got from people were spectacular. I was so afraid of talking about my own
that was actually my
health.
next question. How has the response been?
Yeah, well, it's not like a bestseller or anything, far from it, but the responses I've gotten both through just like, reviews online and professional reviews to people, texting me, emailing me, whatever, telling me when they see me in person and stuff. It was a very profound experience, the responses I got, because I learned so much from that. Because, I'm a Nietzschean Buddhist like Tina Turner or Herbie Hancock. Yeah. And so I see life as something that happens for a reason, and that everything has a reason, and that we're here to learn from it and grow and help other people do the same. But all that aside, I still was like, WTF about 30 things that happened to me in my life. Like, why did that have to happen to me? Yeah. I mean, I understand there's some growth, but I still haven't figured out why, because I'm a very literal, logical person in addition to a very creative person. Yeah. So I'm like, still, but why did that second divorce have to go like that? Why couldn't I just see the red flags when I so all that, when the book came out and I got all these responses with things like, Phil, I'm so glad that you talked about your suicidal ideations. Yeah. Yeah, Phil, I'm so. One guy whose sister is a famous actor. He's like, my sister was in treatment when she got her Oscar. It was like, And so there was a lot of that, and then I realized that's why I went through all those things. Right. It wasn't just for me. We suffer for the sake of other people, and it's not a codependent thing. It's not like, I'm a flagellant whipping my back, for the sake of all your sins or something. It's just that what we carry as a result of our life experiences can also carry other people through similar things, And so that was absolutely the most profound thing that came of that book for me. And, I remain grateful for every response that I've gotten from it, and any new response I get. And, even my pulmonologist, who's like an 82-year-old Jewish guy from Brazil, and he's not a musician, he sent me a postcard after he read my book, and he's like, this is inspiring and stuff. I have it here on my bookshelf at my studio. That's great. To look at it, and I'm like, wow, like I gave it to him when he was retiring. I was like, you're going to need reading material, Doc. I thought he'd give it to one of his grandkids or something. No, he read it, and so I can't say enough how profound an experience that kind of thing is, because you're not looking for it. I was just like, well, I hope people get it. Yeah, I hear it often when people write their personal memoirs or biographies. They realize things when they look at the whole picture that they didn't notice. Kind of like somebody doing a painting and their nose is right in front of it, but when they step back, they see the whole picture. It's a great analogy. I love it. So, Speaking of Buddhism, one of my favorite authors is Pema Chodron. Have you ever read any of her work? Yeah, I read one of her books. I can't remember which one it was. I read it actually when I was in treatment. Yeah, I keep reading them over and over. She's so great. She's a female monk. And one of my favorite quotes that kind of goes along with what you've been telling us is, to be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest. To live fully is to be always in no man's land. To experience each moment as completely new and fresh. To live is to be willing to die over and over again. How would you respond to that? Well, I was at a Buddhist lecture this morning, and they were talking about life and death and how it's part of the same cycle of life. And one thing is you can take the literalness of die over and over again. But
Yeah.
It's not so much reincarnation as just a continuation of your life. You take your karma with you, your past actions and whatnot, good and bad, to carry with you until the next time inception brings you into the world. That's the generally held belief across all the many, different versions of Buddhism, And but then you also have the dying many times over in life itself, in this one life. I built into one of my songs, we all die 3 times in our life.
Wow.
And it's because you can feel like when you break through something. For me, it was like really horrific, kind of dark stuff, that I, pushed through and came out the other side and felt like, I should rename myself or something, like many cultures have done,
After surviving, I now knight you. Full
right,
circle.
Exactly. Give me an eagle feather or something, man, Yeah, so it kind of came from that because I do feel sometimes like I've lived many different lives in this life. And even like just with, aside from like the suicidal stuff and the alcohol and cocaine and what it did to me, there was also just my general health, where when I was 22, I almost died of respiratory failure. And that was one of the few times, but that was a particularly heavy one, where my parents sent the priest to give me last rites. I couldn't talk, so I wrote him a note and I said, I think it's wonderful you came to visit me knowing I'm a Buddhist and stuff. Come back tomorrow. Which he must have, in retrospect, I was like, wow, that had to be a tough decision. He's supposed to be giving me last rites. What if I kick, Then he was listening to tell my parents. He said he wanted to come back tomorrow and talk, But he honored me and he came back the next day and I was up sitting and talking. I obviously made it through the night, and I really felt like that was a spot in my life, a key element in my life where I really came to understand very deeply where I didn't really have a lot going for me at 22. I was kind of a dick,
Yeah.
And I was just really not sure who I was. And I was, very tightly wound and stuff. But I was, it was from that moment that I decided absolutely music is my thing. I'll take this entrepreneurial hustle I have and make a career around music, But it was also that in the middle of that, my girlfriend at the time was sitting next to the bed doing her little Buddhist chant. She was a member too. And she started crying. She said, "Don't die." And in the middle of that, I'm sitting here I'm just like trying to get the next breath. It's very black and white, life and death. Life itself, living it is lots of gray areas, but life and death, it's real simple. You live or you die. What's your choice right now? And it really helped me understand the importance of the moment. Yeah. But I also felt in that moment when I had to think of it while I'm fighting for each breath, I'm like, this isn't the end. I just knew with my life, 110%. This is not the end. If I die right now, this is not, there's more. I don't know what it looks like or anything, but this is not the end. And it helped me to understand what I had felt even before that, even as a kid. Yeah. That it seems like our idea that we're born, we live, we die, and that's our only experience in this world. It just seems like, but everything else becomes fertilizer. Why can't I, And,
that'd be a great bumper sticker.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Here's the last quote that I have for you. Also, when you gave me your book, you gave me Pete Townshend's biography. And the strange thing is I was kind of reading them at the same time. And I found a lot of similarities in your writing style. And
interesting.
A lot of my friends I talk to, I know so many people in Los Angeles who are all over the world that are actors, singers, dancers. And, not a lot of people find fame and financial success and stuff like that. But I think as we get older, and even the people that do reach those heights realize that has nothing to do with the journey that we're going on. I think to focus on those types of success, you kind of lose the original origin of why you do this and who you are. And I think you're a great example of somebody that, you're not tremendously wealthy, but you set out to be a full-time professional musician and you're doing it. And I try to tell all my friends that have like a regular day job. Don't give up if you don't have this huge success, because you're still making all this beautiful art and beautiful music. So with that in mind, I found this great Pete Townsend quote where he kind of touches upon that. I think I've always found a way of looking like I'm enjoying the job, when in actual fact, it's always felt like work. It has always felt like a job. And so for me now, I'm kind of looking at how to get back to that place of creativity being principally play. I don't want to over-egg this, but I do think it's important. And I'm almost at the point of starting an Instagram feed about creativity is play, because so many musicians make music and they struggle now with the fact that it's almost inevitable that they're never going to make any money out of it. So they have to do it for love. So it has to be fulfilling. It doesn't have to be fun, but it has to be fulfilling. So how would you relate that to your journey?
Yeah. All very true.
That's your response.
And
yep.
I'm actually, yep, that's it. Thanks. Bye. Right.
What he said.
Well, what he said, right? Give me the cheap way out here. Yeah. I'm fascinated by, the fact that you saw that I have a writing style similar to Pete Townsend's. It doesn't surprise me, because the honesty with which he has always written is him and John Lennon. I mean, those were big influences from a standpoint of the honesty with which they approach their art. And I'd read his work before and stuff, and interviewed him. So I think we always absorb a little bit of people. We're all just some writer from like centuries ago said we're all just candles between two mirrors, Yeah. So we're just imitating, always absorbing and imitating. But that's always the struggle. And that was that decision that I made when I was 22 and survived the respiratory failure, because I was struggling with, do I make music my main thing, or do I make entrepreneurialism my main thing and make music my secondary thing? And my grandpa had been a very successful accountant, and he never stopped doing music. My oldest brother, a psychologist, and never stopped making music. And I'm like, well, I could do that, I suppose. But it was when I was able to flip it, that, well, I'm doing this for the love of it, and I can use my hustle to create a career around it, finding other elements of it that I enjoy. And I was very happy to find that I really love teaching. Yeah. You shouldn't teach, by the way, you should not teach if you don't love it. If you don't love teaching and you just want it for the job, please don't.
You can tell the difference between those people.
Yes, please go do something else. You can make more money doing something else. Go be a commodities broker, you know. So,
or anger management.
Or anger management. Yes. And so what and every time that I got fed up with the industry, it was both damaging and essential to my next step, essential to my growth. Because always when I got fed up with the industry, it was because I was losing sight of why I was doing this.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah. And so I was able to then recognize that and adjust it. And the final straw of that being when I ended up going to Betty Ford. The spiral that every addict, alcoholic has, was when I was living in Wisconsin with my wife, where she's from, and I was like thinking about quitting music, and the next thing I know, I'm at Betty Ford. Yeah. So it was like,
is there a connection?
Right, the grief, that they actually put me in like grief counseling there, and I was like, what am I grieving? They're like, the death of your art. Yeah, you told us that you wanted to give up, and I was like, I just started bawling. I'm like, you're right, So it's like everything. There's the main like sort of diluted suffering of something, and then there's the enlightened flip side of it. So that every time you hit that wall of I can't stand this industry anymore, you have to re-examine it and recognize that that's your life telling you something about where your focus is and where it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're an artist and you can think of an idea and you can execute it the way that you want it to, you already have success to bring something into the physical realm that was in your head. That is the success we're looking for, and everything else is a journey. And
then the business side of it, I've talked to a lot of musicians, both my contemporaries and students over the years and stuff, and a lot of people who came up like I did, white guys in rock, blues, jazz styles and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Especially in my age group, they're like, oh, I don't really like the business side of things, or I'm not really good at that. It's like, well, we're never good at anything if we don't try it and don't learn about it. So you have to educate yourself. And what is business but a creative use of money, time, and ideas? So if you want to also monetize your work, separate that, go into the other side of the room and go, I'm going to my office now, and go over and do the business side of stuff. And when you get tired of that, go pick up your instrument and start playing again. And what's interesting is because the algorithms in the subconscious part of the brain are always working to do everything, including telling you what color shirt you're putting on, they're also germinating with new ideas. So, you look at some of the most successful people in business. The $3 trillion company known as Apple was created by a man who thought of himself as an artist.
Yeah. True.
And so he looked at form and beauty
and aesthetics.
As one of the most important elements of the product he was creating. And then creatively came up with ways to convince everybody that you need $1,000 little thing in your palm that reaches the rest of the universe. And we all gobbled it up. Yeah, Wonder Box, right? Now you got $1.5 billion worth of technology at your fingertips at any moment, and so and it's interesting though, is I find too, when people come from backgrounds, especially like in urban music, like hip hop, R&B and stuff, and I talk to artists in these realms, many of whom I've also coached and worked with, they have no problem hustling. And when I ask, they're like, well, because we always how does the world treat us? Yeah. So when people are accustomed to working for something, if they learn to not spend their time, convincing themselves they can't, or convincing themselves that, that all the myths are true. Oh, music just exists in the right side of the brain. No, music is scientific. Yeah. Mathematical and creative. It's what is a chord name but a mathematical formula. If you know your theory, you know what notes are in an E minor 7 flat 5. Right. And what every Nobel Prize winning scientist also played music. So you can't, when people say that I can't deal with that business side of things or whatever, I obviously start going on this long rant because I want them to be able to have the lives that they choose and don't not burn themselves out, or find a career that you love, like so many people that I've taught that also wrote code for a living, which they treat as a creative process. They love it. And they're making 6 figures, living comfortably, doing something they love, and they have the music. You can do both. Yeah. Especially in the world now. I don't think it's expected that, you have to break out by the time you're 22, just be a huge rock star and spend all of your time partying and and touring the world and everything. That's not the model anymore. Yeah. The model is create something beautiful and please give it to us, share it with us. And we don't care who you are, And so it hasn't ever been easier to do it. So there's no reason you can't do it except the reasons you make up.
Yeah, and everything's always changing. When people get fearful of AI, I said, hey, I'm a drummer. I remember in the 80s when the drum machine came out and they thought it was going to put everybody out of work, but the smart guys went out and bought a drum machine and said, hey, hire me to play drums on your album or I will program the drum machine for you. Yeah. Before we go, what would you like to promote and how can people find you online? Obviously, if they're in LA, what part of LA do you live in?
I live in the Valley in Sherman Oaks with my filmmaker, actor, director wife. And I have a teaching studio in my warehouse from my little online store in Westwood by UCLA.
Okay, so they can personally see you there, but if they're somewhere else in the country or out of the country, how can they find your stuff online, especially your really cool book?
My book, The Outback Musician's Survival Guide, is available anywhere books are sold online, including at fullcirclemusicstore.com. You can buy it directly from me. And if you shoot me a message, you want me to write a message in it for somebody, I can do that. But it's just available anywhere books are sold. There's paperback, ebook, and an audio book that I recorded in LA before I moved here, actually.
So you have a website, but what social media are you on? What are you on Instagram, Facebook? What's the best place to follow you?
At any of them, honestly. I'm active across everything. So the Instagram, Phil Circle Music, Facebook, Phil Circle Music, Phil
TikTok.
Circle on TikTok, yep. And philcircle.com is my website. It's Phil, Phil, circle like the shape.com. And I've got all the links out to everything from there. It's not hard to find me. If you just search my name, you'll find me. And I have nothing out there that I'm inactive on, except maybe Twitch, and that's not something people are searching for you on. That's something you send them to, But yeah, and I respond to messages from everybody anytime. And if they call my Chicago school, they send me the message. It happened today with a guy who bought a book from Long Beach or something. So yeah, it's really easy to find me. And I'm very responsive because I'm happy to hear from people. And I coach adult musicians of all styles and ages and skill levels, from the absolute beginner in their 60s. I'll have you on stage next year, whether you like it or not. And I've to student of mine who's just at Carnegie Hall. So it's... and I love doing it. And it's collaborative learning. It's I meet you where you are, But I'm also, a performing musician, and I'm about to do a soundtrack for a short film here. And it's all there on my website, all the different things I do. And I've also have the online store, philcirclemusicstore.com.
All right. So wonderful.
That covers everything. And you can find my music anywhere, 50 plus platforms you can find my music on. So.
All right, Phil. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And you know what? Let's do this again soon.
Malcolm, thank you so very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was really enjoyable.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Yeah, I look forward to more, man. All right. You too. Take care.